Welcome back, everybody, to another Party Pace podcast. So, I have a bit of a confession. I grew up in Southern California, went to high school there, college there, and I didn't really ride a bike there. And a lot of my adult life has been going back and discovering interesting roads and routes, especially gravel roads in adulthood. Our guest today on the Party Pace podcast is someone that does a lot of riding in Southern California and California in general. We're going to talk with Zach from Gravel Bike California. He's a YouTube channel. He's also on Instagram. And if you guys don't watch his videos or follow him yet, you totally should. I take a lot of inspiration for rides that Laura and I do from the videos that he shows on his channel. Super awesome resource. And before we get into the interview, if you guys like this content, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, consider supporting the channel. Join us on Patreon, buy some stickers. It's cheap, helps keep the light on, quite literally. And with all that said, let's introduce Zach. How's it going, Zach?
Great. I'm not glistening. It's hot down here, but I'll pull through.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just down in California. And that's one of the things that sparked my interest in having you on the show. Because every time I go back, I'm like, I can't believe I didn't ride this stuff when I was in high school or even in college. And it's much later in life where when I really got into cycling, I started to dig into the back roads just in the LA area.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I wish I got into cycling earlier, but then sometimes I take it from the angle. Maybe I appreciate it more now. Enough of life experiences. So I'm just glad to have the opportunity.
Yeah. In our recent trips, I've come to believe that LA is actually a sleeper kind of gravel destination. A lot of people think of the city and the beach, but there's some interesting stuff in the Angeles Crest Forest or just in the foothills.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the ocean. Like people are drawn to that and to Hollywood, and that's what they think Los Angeles has. And if you just start off on the Santa Monica Mountains, which are just along the coast, there's just fantastic riding there. There's a few fondos that go through there. There's the Backbone Trail, Dirt Mulholland, Topanga State Park, like so many great options there. And that's great for year round because it's by the coast and it stays cooler. But yeah, then you've got the San Gabriel Mountains with the Angeles National Forest, and it's a completely different flavor than the Santa Monica's. It has a little taste of the Eastern Sierra. It has some of the Western Sierra foothills feel as well. And if you just kind of like continue that range all the way on, up to Big Bear, it's just it's great. There's enough other distractions in Los Angeles that these are not as well known.
Right. One of my personal faves and something that we ride every time I go visit my folks is just the Verdugos. And what's hilarious is I went to school in high school in Burbank, and we could see the mountains, and I never thought to ride there. But now every time I go back, it's just a fun like up and down. You can go into the valley, or use it or just go up to the Tree of Life and down.
Yeah, it's kind of like an anomaly because it's the high point of the Verdugo is actually higher than any point in Santa Monica Mountains, and there's no easy way of getting up there. There's about 6 or 7 different ways, and it just kind of sits there right in front of the San Gabriel Mountains. But yeah, it just your perspective you get of the Los Angeles basin so quickly, and then you're right behind where the Hollywood sign is as well. So that's a nice little pocket that it's pretty popular with hikers too, but it's so close to so many people that that's a great starting point if you're ready to climb.
Yeah. We usually like to go up the Latuna Canyon side, and then after we descend, go to the In and Out on Foothill.
Yeah,
that's
that's
right
the easiest.
There. Yeah.
Yeah,
let's talk about your channel. How did it come about? When did you start, and why?
Well, this kind of all grew out of our Facebook group. And what happened was I was in cycling advocacy, but also enjoyed recreational riding as well. And I decided to start up a Facebook group. and nobody joined. And but I was known for my advocacy. I had a blog called Secla Valley. I won a
Hmm.
writing award here. And one day I went up to Pacifico Mountain there in the Andros National Forest. And somebody saw some pictures and they were like, wow, that looks really great. I would love to do a ride. I was like, all right, well, I threw it up on the Facebook group, which probably only had 60 people at the time. And some random people showed up. And then every month I just started having a ride and it would slowly like add people. And then all of a sudden we had like 50 people on a ride up
Oh,
in
dang.
the Verdugos. And I was like, this is a little too much. And I guess COVID happened at about the right time because it gave a good little chance to breathe again. But uh, trying to figure out what to do at that point when we were socked in, I was like, well, I'll start doing gravel guides because that I can do alone and start to share stories. And so I started. My first one was Mount Low, which is an incredible place to hike, ride, because that was actually Los Angeles's first attraction as a series of trains that went up into the mountains in the late 1900s.
Hmm.
And it's just so cool with all the signs there and everything you see of kind of like the living history. And from there we just kind of like continued doing gravel guides. It was Southern California centric because of the pandemic, but we've definitely spread and made a lot of connections across the state as everything is lifted. And it's so hard to stay in one place because there's just so many great opportunities in California.
Yeah. One of the things I really enjoy about your videos, as opposed to other just like pure roadie channels, is that you do include the history, because that's why I like to ride the bike, is explore places. Do you, when you do the ride, are you familiar beforehand, or do you do the research after and include that in the video then?
A little bit of both. I mean, I'm sure people from California, especially Southern California, are familiar with Huell Hauser, who used to do
Hmm.
all these great little travel logs. And I've always been interested in the history of California just because so much has happened over such a short period of time and the amount of growth. And even from the gold rush era, there's a lot of recent traces in that. And so that's why I really love like the history side, because it's so easy to grasp. uh, like I in my life I talked to somebody who had talked to somebody that was in the Civil War. So it's
Right.
like you're not too many degrees of separation of our history. And that's why I think like California is so fresh. And when you talk about roads, roads were put there as part of this history as well to serve certain things. And you can see how certain roads are built, whether they're gravel or paved. Like you can kind of understand what era they were in, what they were trying to do. And when I'm out there, I feel like that is the roads themselves are a living history as well.
Right. Yeah. Um, how long? When did you personally start getting into gravel riding?
Well, I was always hated driving a car and I used to run a lot. And then I was just starting to get into biking when my hip went and I just said I couldn't run anymore. And so I had a road bike and I was commuting and it was kind of hard to do. And so I bought a cyclocross bike. I didn't know much about bikes, so it still took me a while to take that on dirt because I was afraid, how am I going to clean it or anything else? But I mean, that bike served really well on the streets of Los Angeles, which are in terrible shape. But slowly, once you kind of get on the dirt, and my first dirt ride was Dirt Mulholland.
Hmm.
And once you start out there, you're like, wow, this is not that different. So many more options. Being able to connect different parts of Los Angeles was so much easier. And so from there, it was really great because I was able to tie in my history of gravel of trail running to some of the places, but then actually go further, and just because a bike is just so much more versatile in travel.
Hmm. Do you have a sense of, with the folks that you ride with, how many of them is gravel, the interest in gravel growing, or is road declining, or do people still do both, or are there dedicated people that only do one or the other? What's your sense of the local riding scene?
I definitely feel like everyone, whether you've been a lifetime roadie or at least becoming at least a little more aware of it and willing to give it a try. I think people also see that some of these roads here you can still do on a road bike.
Hmm.
So I feel like the nature is kind of shifting towards that. Cycling in general, whether you go to many of these websites, they cover a lot more gravel on these road websites anyways. So I think like a lot of people are definitely curious, but also, Los Angeles is a dangerous place to ride a bike, and so a lot more people have been getting into gravel to, you know, get away from that, but still, be able to ride. And
Right.
so it's just been, a number of things that have really helped the growth. The one problem with Los Angeles is that there's very few like beginner rides that, if you're like getting on a bike for a first time, you're probably going to have to climb. And some
Hmm.
people aren't used to that, or ready to handle some of these downhills on the first shot. So I think once people kind of get above that barrier, and so if you've been on a road bike and you have those skills, then it translates far better. And so we're definitely seeing a bigger uptick, and the interest just continues to grow.
Yeah. What do you think is the kind of most beginnerish friendly gravel ride that someone could do in Southern California? I mean, it's going to involve climbing, but like of
Yeah.
all of all the ones out there.
Well, I think a good one for people to start is Sycamore Canyon, which is on the far west side of the
Mm,
Santa Monica Mountains out of Point Mugu. It's 7 miles where it's pretty flat for the most part. And then on the way back, you can kind of add in like some small rollers. So it has like a little bit of everything for somebody who can go out there a few times and get a little confidence. So I point a lot of people out there for a first ride. And even though it's not really uh, gravel, like the old ridge route is got, you just take some of that stuff in. I know you've been out there. um it definitely ties in also like the history of Southern
mhm.
California as well. So yeah,
And
I
there's a
know, like,
campsite, right? There's a campsite there, isn't there?
I think it's right off the road, and we're
Okay,
going to do a little more research next time we're out.
gotcha.
But yeah, that's a fantastic area too.
Yeah. Let's see. All right, we've got 75-ish people in the chat. If you guys are in California or Los Angeles specifically, let us know. And if you guys are familiar with Gravel by California, also let us know. Um, so how many routes have you covered on the channel?
I think we're probably in the 60 to 70
Oh,
range.
dang. Okay.
And definitely like, I try and pump the brakes on Los Angeles because we have so many of them. And I've just had a couple trips where I've just gotten a ton of other great rides across the state, and discovered some other areas that I would love to come back. But I mean, that's the great part about California, is like really you just want to keep going to the spot you're not in, because there's just so much great opportunity out there and variety that you can really just keep going.
Is there a part of California that you've wanted to ride but haven't had the chance to yet?
Well, I really think like the northern edge of of North California. uh it's Del Norte County, Siskiyou, and
Mm-hmm.
Modoc. And Siskiyou, actually, even though the county only has 9,000 people, has the most gravel events in California. And it's just a real interesting dichotomy because like I think like the volcanic activity kept the forest from reaching a certain level. And I got a little taste in there last week, and it was just fantastic with Mount Shasta in the background. The roads
Mhm.
were in great shape. I met Bill from the local bike shop there, and just like a great little community there. So I've not been able to do too much stuff there. I did a little short gravel ride in Crescent City in Jebediah Smith State Park, and that was real fantastic. It might have been my best experience riding in between the redwoods.
Oh,
So it's a little short. I definitely it's a little too short for maybe a gravel guide for me, but I definitely want to go back and explore like that whole edge.
yeah. Let's see. All right, we've got Taylor here. He said he's been on several rides with you.
Yes.
Uh,
Hope you're
Henrier
healing
says
well.
Zach is a piper of California gravel. Got Stephen here who just rode Dirt Mulholland and Sullivan Fire Road yesterday. Aaron Vasquez, Pasadena representing. All right, and James Kim from San Gabriel Valley. So we were talking about this a little bit before we started, but what's kind of your process when you decide, I'm going to film this ride? How often do you film? What's your do you time yourself and like film periodically, or do you just wait until you get to the really good spots, or do you leave the camera running the entire time?
Like my methodology, I think is always kind of like changing. Like I think I've gotten to a point where I'm just like, okay, I've got a front and rear camera, and then I've got a third camera. So I shoot most of the stuff with the hand camera, and I just try and shoot it as the way I view it and things that I see. When I'm out of town, like people like Henry that just commented, like he is like a great resource for like the Yosemite area and below. um I try and do that, but then I also throw everything into Google Maps, into Google Earth, and
Mhm.
then like I'll do a flyby, because sometimes it may seem like a great point, but you're surrounded by trees. So I definitely try and pre-scout everything, and know where the high points are, because that's typically where the views are, and definitely where the stops, try and tie in the history. And I go over the USGS historical maps ahead of time too, as well, to see what footprints were there before as well. So I have
Mhm.
like an inkling of like what to see along the way, but I still try and stay open enough for discovery, because I'm trying to experience the way other people would experience it as well.
Right. So you have some drone footage. Do you have someone else that does the piloting, or do you do that as well?
I've been doing the piloting. I've also been doing crashing into stuff, so I can't blame anybody else. I just got the drone back because it actually sliced up a bee,
Oh,
and the
jeez.
pollen got all over the camera, and it got sticky. So I just got the drone back, and I have mixed feelings about using it, because like I hate to ruin the flow of a ride. So I like to bring it like at certain points where I just know I'm going to stop, or
Mhm.
most people I'm with are pretty cool with waiting 5 minutes to pull it out. But yeah, I try not to turn this into a whole day production, because like it
It can
shows on
become that,
people's face.
like, yeah. Usually when Laura and I, decide, okay, we're gonna make a video about this route, it takes so much longer. And it must be tough, like, to do it during, when you have a group of other riders, besides yourself.
Yeah, I pick and choose, and I definitely try and pick out where I know the points I'm going to use the drone ahead of time. And this new DJI 3 is so much better than any small drone that they've had before. So it makes it easier. I don't think it takes as much time as maybe it's just economies of scale. It's a lot faster than the last drone that I had, and it
Yeah,
does a lot of great things.
yeah. Um, so we're talking about this before we started too, but like finding that balance between rides where you're filming and essentially working, and rides just for fun. Like how do you find that balance for yourself?
Well, I think luckily I have gotten good enough with the camera that I don't think as much about what I need to shoot. Am I shooting this? Am I getting enough footage? I think I'm like comfortable enough to know that I can just pull out the camera and I can still talk and shoot. But you still do miss something of of being totally like enveloped in the ride. But uh, I think like riding with other people definitely helps bring down that barrier. And I just focus on the ride because if it I think like if it feels too much like a production, it'll show too much like a production. So
Hmm.
I have to be interested in the ride. And I try not to sell every ride as, oh, this is the best one ever. If something is really bad, I think like people would appreciate knowing that. And I make these videos basically like as if I was making for myself. Like, what would I want to know if I was doing a ride? What would I really hate, or so that when someone else picks these up, that it becomes like a really great guide and reference point for them.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, we've definitely watched your videos and taken inspiration for them. For us, it's like I was thinking of I think it's the Camp 9 one that goes up May Canyon. Like we wanted to cut out that stretch on foothills. We're like, let's just park at the park, then do the climb up to the fire station and back. So that's one thing I like about it. It's like you could do the whole thing, or you can cherry pick like we do.
Well, I think it's most important, like what you enjoy and how people share. And I think like there's just so many like great voices that you pick up like inspiration from. And like same thing for me, like watching your videos has definitely given me like great ideas and how to do things. So it's a fantastic community.
Cool. So we've got a question here from Dave. How do you choose a target for a video? Do you pick a region and then Google to see what people know about it? So how do you go about finding rides to film?
Well, and first thing, when people watch my gravel guides, I just tell people I may give you all the information, but you need to do your homework ahead of time too, because sometimes a road is closed. And so for me, I try and minimize that happening when I go out to shoot a video. And what's great is like our Facebook group now has over 15,000 people. And there are not a big fan of the platform as a whole, but I think like our group works really well in terms of asking people for in terms of being a resource.
Hmm.
And like Henry, who I mentioned, like I connected with him, and we've become friends. And he just knows the area, so it just helps so much being able to use our group to interact with people and to double check, because you can look at the maps, you can look at the Strava, but ultimately like using other people for guides is the best way. So there's a guy, two people in the Bay Area, Mike Solis and Andy Wong. Like you put them together, like it's just kind of like a beautiful mind talking in terms of like them floating all the courses back there. So like definitely I think like to start off first is to ask people. And and that's the strength of this community, is you can lean on them and ask people for questions. So I'm
Hmm.
I'm always reaching out to people before I start anywhere. And I personally, part of my gravel guides come with the fact that I try and mix it in with family stuff. We were going up to visit my wife's family in Oregon, so I said, okay, how about I'll drive up, I'll shoot a couple videos along the way, and then on the way down, shot a couple more, and explored a couple places. So yeah, I try and be as efficient as I can on these trips and try and shoot as many videos as possible when I do get to travel.
Yeah. Do you is there a mapping platform that you prefer? Like if when you're kind of searching for where people have ridden, to use Strava more or ride with GPS or Komoot?
Well, I start with Ride with GPS, but I also use like All Trails and Trail Forks
Mm,
sometimes on top of it as well, because like sometimes you need to see pictures and understand what the surface is, because there's a ton of great roads or great looking roads across California, but you just don't know what the surface is like. And that Eastern Sierra is a fabulous place to go, but it can be really sandy, very pumicy. So being able like to cross reference with, you know, I I do start off with riding with GPS, but
mhm.
Strava and as many different things as possible. I get into.
Do you have you ever planned a route and gone there to film it, and it's nothing like you expected from the pre-beta that you were trying to gather?
Well, last year was a significant landmark birthday for me, and I wanted to bike down the North Coast from Eureka down into Petaluma. And I was planning on doing road. And I was talking with Mig Crawford, who started the Grasshopper series. And he's like, oh man, you've got to do Usal Road. So beautiful. And it'll be the highlight of the trip. And so it was on day 2. And day 1, I went down to this place called Shelter Cove, which is right in the middle of the Lost Coast. And you start off with like a 2-mile climb at like 12%. And Usal Road was kind of like the Dagobah system. It was just very murky. You didn't get the views, and you just if it wasn't for the mapping tools, really kind of like lost your orientation after a while. And I was so grateful to get out of there. And I guess what I learned is you have to try and pick and choose when you're riding along the coast, because summertime, when it seems like it would probably be good, is probably when the fog level is a little bit heavier.
Mm,
So I wish I'd done a little bit more research on the timing of the ride, because that area is gorgeous when you can see stuff.
right.
So I still haven't made the video from last year yet, but I promise that will come in 2023.
Yeah. So Taylor asked, how many times have you gotten lost looking for new routes, or have you ever mapped out a route and had to kind of uh, reroute on the fly because of an obstacle or anything?
I believe there's somewhere in my head where it has happened, but I might have gotten out of my memory because it was such a. Uh, uh, but we've been very lucky that we've never been super lost. I think it's interesting when we're riding. It's almost when we come to every junction, we double check and make sure. Whereas when, like in the Bay Area, everyone seems to know every trail and not get lost.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I've never had to, call 911 or have a helicopter come out. But yeah, definitely like years ago when I was in a trail running, different story. And we're just
Right.
really lucky with all the resources now that it very rarely happens.
Do you use a Garmin or your phone to navigate?
I have a Wahoo, and I was
Okay.
pretty comfortable with the Garmin, and my Garmin was starting to die, and then somehow I had won a Wahoo, and I was just like, this is not going to work because I only know Garmin. But now I've become really comfortable with it. So like, I think they're all do really great stuff. So, but I've definitely learned how to use this really well, and very rarely have gotten lost.
Yeah. Cool. So we got so many people in the chat. If you guys have any questions for Zach, put those in the comments below. What else are we going to talk about here? Okay. So if someone's visiting Southern California for just like a long weekend, what 2 rides or 3 rides would you point them at?
Well, I mean, my favorite ride out here, which the loop is partially closed right now, but Pacifico Mountain, which is about 45 minutes away from, maybe an hour from downtown, 45 minutes away from me, in the Angeles National Forest. And you get up to above 7,000 feet, and you, on a clear day, you can, see out Los Padres Santa Barbara, Mojave Desert, and just like these things all slowly get revealed on your way up. And so and then eventually when you get to the top there, it really feels like you're in the Eastern Sierra. You can probably even see Mount Whitney on a clear day. I've never had a clear day, but you do see the Sierra. So I really think that's a great starting point. I think like in LA, closer to the city, like West Ridge, which goes up to the Nike Tower there, like that's a popular hub to connect with people. And then Peddler's Fork is in Calabasas. It's a great restaurant, which is a good resource. So from there you can kind of like come in and out of a lot of rides. And then it's a tough ride to start, but definitely going up the Mount Low Railway up to Mount Wilson. There's a cafe up there. You're Mile High, and then you take Mount Wilson Toll Road home. And there's just so much. It doesn't feel like it's only 27 miles. It definitely feels like it's at least a half century. But there's just so many great little nuggets that you don't associate Los Angeles with being that old in that area.
Right. So Matt here asks a interesting question. How many times have you found the routes in SoCal to be rougher than ideal for a gravel bike and more ATB cross country mountain bike appropriate?
I think for the most part, most of the dirt is pretty gravel friendly. It doesn't totally exonerate you from not needing a mountain bike, but I think that a lot of the roads are in pretty good shape. I think the thing is we kind of wish we had more of them. I know that there's a Santa Monica Mountains plan that Corba, which is Steve Messer, who's also on the board of directors of the California Mountain Biking Association. They're working to bring more access to roads in Santa Monica Mountains and around. So I think you're more likely than not for the roads here to be gravel friendly. And I think a lot of people have been going on the trend with the wider tires. So I think they become even friendlier. So I think most of the things you can take a gravel bike on, and definitely if you stick to a fire road, those are probably like 99.9% perfect.
Right. For the gravel roads in the Santa Monica Mountains, do you know why they're off limits now? Are they like former military or private property?
Yeah, it's a mixture. I know, for example, the Backbone Trail, which you can only it's a 69-mile trail that you can ride on parts, but not all. You can even if you could ride a gravel bike, some parts I wouldn't recommend. A couple parts are overgrown. Some parts are really fantastic. And I think one thing that people are working on in terms of closing the gap is, like I said earlier, Sycamore Canyon is a great footnote on the western end, but you can't quite connect with that other than going all the way back into Simi Valley or back along the coast. But they're actually kind of working on some type of connection that will tie the two. So, I think that, advocacy has become a lot stronger in the state and becoming a lot more coordinated. So I'm hoping in my lifetime, I'll at least be able to enjoy one more trail.
It moves on a geological timeline sometimes.
Yeah.
So outside of California, where else have you done ride guides?
Well, I've pretty much stuck to California because, with COVID, I just haven't really traveled too far in that time. But I am pretty fine to being Gravel by California adjacent. I am going to Colorado next month, and there's a group that started out of Southern California called Thank Gravel. It's Friday. They now live in Boulder. They've had a few Hawaiian shirt rides out here that they do once a year, and Dom and Carrie are just so much fun. And so I'm timing this trip to go up to Boulder and ride with them. So I'm definitely open to going other places because, yeah, I mean, there's so many great possibilities around the, the western part. But for me, because I'm just familiar with the history of California and know the area better, like I'm fortunate that there's so much opportunity.
Right. Let's see. What is your personal gravel bike that you take out? Is it still the cross bike, or you get something else?
I've had my Niner RLT,
Okay.
and kind of like how I got into gravel was I had my cyclocross bike, but I knew it had its limitations. So I just kind of started going onto eBay and kind of lowballing and just seeing if I could happen to win something. So like I had won this $5,000 Ridley for $1,300.
Nice.
Unfortunately, I also had another bid open and I won a second bike. And that was interesting explaining to my wife that I had not one but two bikes coming unplanned. Um, but the Ridley, I didn't know the Ridley sizing was different. So it was a really fast bike, but other than being tall, like the geometry wasn't so great. So I wanted to get like a real durable bike, and the Niner has just been fantastic. How it's
Hmm.
everything that I've thrown at it, because I get plenty of crash videos at the end of the year with that bike, and the frame has survived and everything I've put it through. So um, I may be looking at a different bike because I've put a lot of miles on, and the trend, this is 2017, so everything has kind of gotten a wider clearance.
Hmm.
So I may be looking for like a different brand, but like I've been so happy with this bike and everything that it's given to me. So I really hope whatever I get can perform just as well.
Cool. So we got a question here. Do you have any plans on starting your own gravel cycling event slash race, like Belgian Waffle, like expanding from the YouTube channel brand?
I've thought of it. I mean, like for example, like, but I really enjoy like the grassroots aspects of these things. Like I
Hmm.
know the Belgian waffle is very popular. A lot of people come and travel for that. But for me, like it's more about the experience. And if you're really racing, you're gonna miss out on a lot of stuff. So if I ever did something like that, I would love to concentrate a little bit more on the people, the places. Um,
Hmm.
I like Henry, who was on here earlier, like his Everyone Loves Raymond ride was in the foothills of the Sierra, and it was just so great. It was perfectly green. The Chowchilla River was flowing. It was gorgeous, and nobody was racing it. Everyone was out there just enjoying it. So if I were ever to do something like that, it would definitely have to be in that type of vein, and then also trying to advance some type of cause.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a lot to ask. So I don't know if I'll ever get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Events sound like a handful. Like God bless the race directors that put them on, but it just seems between like all the fees and logistics and legalities, it's it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I might be a little bit more leaning towards just like, hey, everyone, just come meet up at this campground. Let's hang out there. Everyone can kind of split up and ride and whatever. Because I kind of feel like that's a little bit more about like what gravel is about. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, just I enjoy the community, and I know a lot of people travel for some of these great events. But yeah, there's so many great things to experience.
Yeah. Someone's asking, are you planning to ride on July 4th? And if yes, what's the ride day? All the deets. Anything, or is that just a family day?
Yeah, that's a family day. I didn't
Mhm.
know when we moved into our house. A big parade comes right by our in front of our house. So like I'm kind of like tied into to been doing that since we've been living here for, I think this is our 14th parade.
Mm.
But like I think like if you're in Southern California, what's even though it's fireworks season, like a lot of people take advantage of GMR being closed and some of the other roads. I know that there's if it's a road bike thing, but a Mandeville Canyon, I believe
Hmm.
it's a ride that's led by LAPD comes out and helps lead people. But I think that's the one thing is you can definitely look to some places that try and use that try and limit access that opens up for cyclists this time.
Yeah. Cool. Do you have any favorite bike shops in SoCal that tend to cater towards the gravel stuff?
Well, I mean, like we have like a lot of great um I know you just did the LA bike shop that's opening up, which is great. I know there's Let's Go Cyclery. In my neck of the woods, there's like Studio Cycle. I try and go to them all. There's Peddlers West. Um, so there's a lot of really great things around. One shop I do want to highlight, I guess you would consider in Southern California, is Bakersfield, is Grizzly Cycles.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Fun. I mean, Kevin is fantastic and really has the stoke and leads so many different types of rides, let alone of bike camping. And I've stopped in there a couple times and he's thrown my bike on the rack. But just such a great community that he's helped foster there. And I know most people probably don't think Bakersfield is a gravel haven, but I mean,
Hmm.
you're off the Kern River, and there's so many great places to ride. And if you're ever in Bakersfield, definitely stop in.
Yeah, we've been in that area a couple times. Like we've camped out at Windwolves
Mhm.
Preserve. It's not a very long dirt road, but you can certainly ride it, and it's super scenic and it's awesome for birding. So when Laura and I go out there, we'll just take the binos and it just becomes an afternoon. But we've not yet made it to Grizzly. Um, let's see. So Zal Sensor asks, favorite DIY trail food or trail snack?
Well, I mean, I never say something is kind of like shoes, right? Like shoes may not be actually better than another; it might just actually fit you better. So it doesn't necessarily mean the quality of the shoe is different. For me, like I don't know if it's just my body's just kind of been used to whatever like Cliff products put in, but I've been very comfortable like using most of their stuff and being pretty reliable. Um, I've been trying to cut down my intake of sugar as well. So, I try not to rely as much. And I've slowly been able to wean on my reliance of, sugary foods as much. But, it's a process and it's really hard because, when you go out versus your regular everyday diet, it's really hard for your body to adapt. So,
Hmm.
like I said, like everyone will find a product that that may feel comfortable for them to digest. And yeah, I mean, like whenever I've got a long ride the next day, like I have pizza the night before. I know like how it's going to digest and the carbohydrates. So you try. Everyone has to find like their own little comfort level.
Yeah. I found that for me, like climate has a big to do with digestion. Like when we were training for what's now called Unbound, it's like we were in Montana and it's cold, 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 and the food worked well. But the second we were like in Kansas, it was like hot and humid. Like I couldn't, you know, my stomach just turned like inside out.
Yeah, and I think like that's a big problem too. So when you go from doing your regular ride around with friends and stuff, and then going on the more strenuous, like the food, the drink, everything becomes so much more exponential. You have to stay on top of it, and I think like that's where I got into problems on big rides earlier. Was I just kind of like tried and keep consistent, but sometimes it's the heat. Sometimes you're really grinding too much, or it's been too long between stops. So I've gotten definitely better in that, and I haven't really bonked in a long time, which means I'm probably setting myself up.
Do you find that there's like a seasonality to gravel in SoCal? Like there's, ideal months and then other months when you should probably go do something else?
Yeah, I think like summer things kind of like really cool off because it's so hot, and spring is fantastic and fall is fantastic and winter is probably better than summer. But you know, like like Henry and other people there at the Central Valley, what they do is when the summer months they go further up into the mountains, and we kind of have that opportunity here in Southern California as well. So you definitely need to be aware in time at all. There is gravel, but you may either have to wake up early, travel a little bit, but yeah, summer the schedule really dries up.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to start to take us home here, but what's next for GBC?
Well, after the Colorado trip, gravel season starts kicking up again, and then I'm going to do it's a new event called Lassen Gravel Adventure. It takes place on the Biz Johnson Trail, which is a former railroad. That's kind of it starts out of Susanville, so it takes you kind of along the edge of Lassen National Park. Unfortunately, I the next week is Mammoth Tough, but it falls on a holiday I can't go on, so I'll definitely be back in Mammoth Tough. But that is a great event that showcases the Eastern Sierra. And then in October, the Fresno Cycling Club, which Henry is part of, like they have an event called the Grizzly Century, which is for road ride, but they also have a gravel event as well.
Cool.
So it's about 60 miles and it starts, just south of Yosemite. So I imagine things will cool down by then, even though we're a little bit up there. But
Yeah.
yeah, that area is fantastic as well.
Yeah. What are your plans for the YouTube? Do you plan to expand it into larger business and go full time, or is this just for funsies?
Yeah, I wish I had a great, super solid, planned out answer, and had venture capitalists just jump all over all this. I've been involved in cycling advocacy for many years before this,
Mhm.
and for me, it's just been like the community has always like responded to uh to people really making this a place for them to share, and I'm hoping a little bit that this was the direction that it'll go. And we've definitely seen a lot of growth the last couple of years, and exactly where we can keep everyone still interconnected, everyone helping each other, promote all these great events around here. That is you know part of what we want to become, and then also help bring people into areas, because definitely like the northern third of the state had their economies built on the gold rush or tree foresting, and it's definitely changed things, but there's definitely plans for bike trails that are going in to help fill this void and for travel. And there's something that's going that's pretty much been approved, but obviously needs to be built, called the Great Redwood Trail, that would
Mhm.
connect Sausalito up to Eureka,
Oh,
which
wow.
would give people a whole other way of going up the coast and then making their way back down. So
Right.
um, yeah, so hopefully I could latch on to something.
Yeah. Gravel bike tourism, next big thing. Um, cool. Well, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thanks so much, Zach, for being on the live stream. And if you guys enjoyed the Party Pace podcast, be sure to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Be sure to subscribe to Gravel Bike California as well. They're on the YouTubes, great guides. Laura and I use them definitely for inspiration for rides of our own. Um, you know, if you like the channel, you know what to do. Buy some stickers, join us on Patreon, and as always, keep the supple side down.